how amazing is it that we get to be part of a generation that is more open to talking about this kind of stuff so that we can stop it and we can break these strongholds now. And doing that work for ourselves and for the children that we have in our lives, we also free the people behind us.
I am so excited to have Justine here today. And Justine has over 20 years of experience in mental health and personal development. She has changed thousands of lives from her trainings, her TED Talks, her books that she's written. And she has worked with hundreds of companies, including giant companies like Boeing and Square, and even small and local businesses. That's actually where I first met Justine, when she came to my place of work and did one of the Dare to Lead trainings with us. The training was amazing, and Justine did fantastic, very good at sharing her personal stories and really making it her own. Like I said, she's also published quite a few best-selling books, and she has another book coming out in June 7th is the official launch date. However, you can already pre-order it, which I'll put the link below. Her new book is 100 devotions for kids dealing with anxiety, which I think you can't have a more appropriate book right now than a book dealing with anxiety. And I love how it's focused specifically on our kids. Hi, how are you doing?
How are you? I'm good. Thank you for having me. You're my first one on this new book. So,
oh, that's so exciting. Well, I saw that, I mean, you already have it up for pre-order, but doesn't officially launch until June 7th.
Yeah. So they've had it. So all of this has been so new. I haven't ever published. I mean, HarperCollins is a big publisher.
Huge deal. Yeah.
So I haven't ever, this is my first, like with a big publishing house. And so they've had it for pre-order for a while. I knew, they asked me to write the book in May. I wrote it in August. So, and it will come out in June. So it's just like a long process.
Wow. So
It's
I
very
guess
different than self-publishing.
oh, yes. And I don't know if you know, but I've been looking into writing a children's book. So I'm very fascinated by authorship, and yeah, I listen to tons of podcasts, and a lot of they talk about being an author, publications, and the difference between self-publishing. There's like several. I had somebody describe it to me. There's like complete self on by yourself. You're figuring it out on your own. There's kind of like self. I think they called it assisted. So it's
hybrid,
right?
Hybrid. Yep.
Yeah. And then the completely traditional big publishing house, the whole kit and caboodle. So that's exciting for you.
I have been down all of the roads. So
yes. Yeah. Well, I was also looking through your currently published books, which I did not realize how many you had out. So that's very exciting. Well, one thing I am very passionate about is, I want to help everybody, but I think the ones that have less to support and work with sometimes are our kids. And I love that your book is for kids.
Thank you.
Can you tell me more about why you had the heart to write this book?
Yeah. Well, it's wild. So I've had my editor is Angela Guzman, and she was in, I think technically PR when I met her at HarperCollins, and I met her because I was on the Jesus Calling podcast, and Sarah Young's assistant at that time, Linda Tozer, her kind of like do everything woman, brought me on the podcast. I've done a couple prayer calls with Linda for Jesus Calling, and she had reached out to Angela and was like, you need to meet this woman. Like, your stories are similar. Cause Angela had experienced pregnancy loss, and she was like, and plus she really likes the F word like you do. She loves Jesus. She loves that word too. And Angela like, okay, I'll check her out. So Angela, like, this was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And I told Angela, like, we will always tell this story because it's just so sacred. And so Angela kind of like helped me out, like on the side, got me into a couple podcasts, pretty big podcasts. And just like, trying to get me a couple of appearances and stuff like that. And so we just developed this friendship. She had written a blog post and put my name like with these other names. I was like, that's kind of like, I am nowhere near as big as those people, but okay, thank you, whatever. And so we connected because we've both lost, right? Like we wonder what they would be like. Like my 3 would be 9. I don't want your kids or someone else's kids. I don't want a baby. Like I would like to know who my 9-year-olds would be like. And I love this life. Like it doesn't mean that I don't have grief right alongside it. Right. Like, but I love our life without children. And it doesn't mean that I don't long for them either. And so when Angela, she's like, one day I'll be in a position to kind of get you in front of people and get you what you deserve, whatever. And so then she's a senior editor at HarperCollins. And she's like, so I pitched this book at the beginning of the pandemic. And that the publisher was like, yeah, like we're publishing this book. And it's underneath, it's called Renew, which is like an arm of Zonder Kids. And so it's like, it's a devotional based off of another devotional, like 365 devotionals. So all that really means is they take some of similar scriptures, but I still write all of the devotions, which is interesting. It's just an interesting concept. They repackage something with a new author and a new idea. And so she's like, I pitched it, and the publisher was like, yeah, this like needs to be out now. Do you have an author? And she goes, I do. You don't know her. And so, and Angela's like, so this is not the contract that you necessarily deserve. And it's what I can get you. And I think that this book is supposed to be written by you. And so I had to really I had to wrestle with my own stories, right? Like I don't have kids, and I'm going to write a book for teens and tweens. And yeah, I'm a therapist, and I'm totally qualified in that aspect to write this book. But there's that shame and imposter syndrome comes up. And I had asked her, I go, so I also need you to know, like, and you've read my writing, like I will write about my Jesus, and you will not. And if that means I'm not the author for this, like, then that's okay. But I will not write that we are wretched souls and have a God who hates us. Like I will write how loved we are. Can you imagine if our generation had been taught and grown up to believe how loved we actually are? Like loved. And we don't. And she's like, write the book. She goes, I have a feeling that you're just going to download it, which I've written a lot of books at this point. I have never downloaded a book, like ever. They've always been very painstaking to write, horrible to edit because that is not my gift. And so I wrote almost the whole book in a couple of days when I had a speaking engagement in Idaho, and I stayed a couple nights to see how many of these 100 devotionals I could get out. And I think I ended up writing 75 of them in a few days. And then I was able to come home and finish it. And so it's it's a scripture, short devotional, and then a journaling prompt, like kind of a reflective journaling or anxiety coping activity to do. And then Angela was my editor, which it was my first time having, I don't want to say a real editor, but like an editor, like that's what she does for a living. Like she gets paid and paid well to do it. And so like to have an editor that really takes, that still keeps your spirit and your writing was a true gift, because I write with repetition. I wrote more poetically, and I like really long sentences or really short sentences, but that's how I write. And she's like, I chose you knowing that. And so even at this point, I've now read that book, oh my God, probably 7 times. It's and I get to read it next Friday because I get to record the audiobook, which was really exciting to hear that they're letting me read the audiobook.
Yeah.
So I'm recording that next Friday. But every time I read it to kind of check on edits and things like that, I would look at my husband Chad and I'd be like, I know I wrote it. I know I wrote it. And like, it's much bigger than me. And I don't, you always kind of have that feeling when you write a book, like, this isn't for me, it's for someone else, even if it's for the one person. That's one of my core values, is like, I will come for the one person. I Would it be nice to have more exposure on social media? Sure, but that's just because I want more people to have this work, not because I have any desire to be famous or go viral. And I will come for the one, because Jesus came for me, and so I will come for the one. One is enough. And so even if this book only helps one kid, it will be worth the year journey, really, over a year, to get it in people's hands. And so it's a really exciting book. I've had 18 people read it for early reviews. And I keep being asked, like, well, it says it's for teens and tweens, right? And I was like, it's also for everybody, because aren't we all a little bit still the 14-year-old girl who was tortured and like so unsure of herself? And so it's for you too.
Can I
So
ask, were you, did you envision someone when you were writing this book?
yeah, so I made a graphic of some of my friends' kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I have a kind of like a collage on my phone that I would kind of pull that out. And one of my best friend's son struggled with some pretty hardcore anxiety over the pandemic, so he was in it. I have another friend whose daughter, teenage, 12 to 14, is just really hard, especially when you're really tall and really thin and really beautiful. It's hard, which is like, you'd think it would be the opposite. It's both. It's all just freaking hard. And
Yep.
plus, like, they're growing up in this world where they're bombarded with images that don't freaking exist.
Yeah.
Like perfection everywhere on social media. And it's so much. And so I had multiple kiddos on that graphic that I know, and that even if I don't have like the super closest relationship with them, like I knew I was writing it for them. And I bet I still, to this day, even after leaving private practice 4 years later, I get at least one phone call a month, people asking me to see their children as a therapist. So like and it's like, I don't do that anymore. Here's a couple names. And right now it's so hard because therapists are just they're full.
Yeah.
So if there's your numbers, like, it's really hard to find a therapist right now. Like,
Yeah.
it feels almost impossible. And the need is just gonna grow. And so yeah, I totally, and I haven't shown anybody that graphic yet, or even told their parents that, like, yeah, I totally had Noah in my head when I was writing this. And like, Noah's 14, he's a freshman. So like, we're starting not to be cool, right? Like, so like, part of it was like also intimidating. Like, is this going to be cool enough for Noah?
So I have a nephew who I adore, and his birthday is going to be in just a couple of weeks, and he's going to be 15. And he has dealt with so much in his life. But on top of all of that, again, the past 2 years, especially, like you said, everybody has their hard.
Yep.
And I think that generation has had a huge hard.
They have lost so much. And if I will always respond to it now, but like, we must stop saying kids are resilient. They shouldn't have to be this resilient. The adults in their life really need to be doing better.
Yeah.
Like, it just, what we have asked of them is just, it's not okay. It's stolen so much. And I think that's one of the biggest parts. Like, I do believe, like, we've done the very best that we knew how. And even in all the things that I didn't agree with or whatever else they may have been, like, it's what information we had at the time. Yeah. And we went with it. And unfortunately, the way our world is set up, a lot of different pieces go into that. And like, it's hard not to feel frustrated by that, or to feel like so much was stolen, or how much kids have lost, or what are the long-term effects of what they have been through these last 2 years. Because it's very different than those of us like who are in our 30s or 40s. Like, you're a kiddo, these are very impactful years.
Yeah. I have a stepdaughter, and she's going to be 12 in May. So I'm surrounded by this age group. So it's a big deal for me as well. Now to be a step parent is also really hard.
Uh-huh.
You're kind of, you never know, right?
Right.
What position you're supposed to be in other than be a really good example. But what I was going to ask was, because I think adults need to also understand how to best support kids in a way that they don't fully understand. They don't know what it's like to be 13 and in a pandemic.
Right.
They know
In
what
a
it's like to be
pandemic with a phone in their hand all the time.
right with technology
I
all
mean,
around
seriously,
them.
like think about it. Like I did not have, I had a flip phone in college and I wasn't allowed to use it because it was so expensive, right? Like, so I'm part of the generation that we have a foot in both worlds still, right? Like,
Yep.
but I'm the last one at 42. Like, and so it's like, there's so much that it's difficult for parents to wrap their heads around. And so we tell parents like, one, I need you to remember they literally don't have access to all of their brain. Like literally, it's not all connected. Like when, especially teenage years into their 25, like no frontal lobe, planning, execution, like just like making good decisions, right? Like
Yep.
they don't have access to it. They are supposed to stumble and struggle. And like, for God's sakes, let them, because it's how they learn to get up.
Mhm.
Like the best thing you can do for them is to let them fall and fail and end up face down, marred with dust and sweat and blood, right? Like in the arena, like let them fall, let them pick themselves up with your support, hold them accountable to doing better next time in a kind and generous way,
Mm.
and be the dang adult that you want them to grow up into.
Oh, I like that.
Like, but love them with curiosity and generosity, and remember, like, it's hard. Like, but I think one of the things that can be so hard for parents today, and we just went through this with one of our best friends, like even like the smallest, silliest, not so great decision in the world that we live in, you need to bet that you are being recorded
Mm.
and that it will be shared out of context and shared to people who don't know you, that wouldn't be able to say something like, that wasn't great. And that's totally not like him. I know that that's not him. That's not how this goes. But like you are growing up with technology. I got to make my mistakes without that.
Yeah.
I got to be a normal teenager without proof of it. That could literally haunt me until the day I die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to make you live scared or reserved or not yourself. It's to help you live in the tension of both. I need you to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And I need you to also know that, like, if you want to know that, like, you want to be able to say, like, yeah, I screwed that up and that wasn't okay. And it's still like, it wasn't malicious, right? Like,
Right.
and so that's a piece that I don't think enough parents are talking about. Like, you cannot keep them in a bubble. It's actually really not that helpful for them to be kept in a bubble because they will be exposed to the world. And it probably is always best that you expose them first and then arm them with the tools and the language to still uphold their values and your family's values when they come into contact with some of those difficult situations or topics.
Have the conversations. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and I want to acknowledge it's a hard time. I don't think being a parent is ever easy,
No,
but this is a
the
hard,
hardest job on earth.
yes,
Hardest
it
job. Yes,
is. But this is a hard time to be a parent. Um,
100%.
and so for your book coming out, how do you want people to experience it? Do you want the adult to be reading it with the kid? How do you want
Yeah.
it to be
I know.
experienced?
It's so exciting. Like, I had a girlfriend that she was one of my early reviewers. She has 4 children. She homeschools. They're entrepreneurs. And she goes, as I was reading it with my 9-year-old, like, it dawned on me, like, we can do that, whether or not we read it together or we read it separately and visit about it or whatever else, or do the activity together, however it works for our family. Like, I realized, like, I have my own anxiety, and how much of my own anxiety have I hurled onto them because I didn't have the skills, tools, and language to cope with it in a healthy way, because I didn't grow up in a home that was, well, safe for her, right? Like, and so that element of like it became this tool of like, oh my gosh, this is totally for me. This is going to help me break generational trauma. This is going to help me like arm them with skills, tools, and language that I'm starting to get now, but I could have had back then. And I'm going to make sure that they have them now. So their struggles maybe hopefully don't have to be as difficult as mine. And it was that element of that first piece of like, oh my gosh, like because the more I'm learning about healing, the generational trauma and hurts and pains, how amazing is it that we get to be part of a generation that is more open to talking about this kind of stuff so that we can stop it and we can break these strongholds now, that they don't have to go on for 4 more generations. And doing that work for ourselves and for the children that we have in our lives, we also free the people behind us.
I think that is a big key to helping, like you said, the next generation is having more conversations, being more curious, coming back full circle there.
Yes.
And, that curiosity and kindness, I think, is really the medicine we need.
Yeah. Well, and I hope like this book too, like it was a really big deal to me to include the tangible pieces of what could help. What are some ideas that you maybe have never thought about that sound so goofy and weird and also simple that you might try to help feel a little bit better today? And then you go tell your friend, like, have you ever heard of like putting your feet in the grass? Like, have you ever heard of that? It's like, I don't know, but it felt really cool, right? Like, because people need to be given permission to walk into their own healing, to receive the healing that they deserve. But not only given that permission, to be given some tools to actually navigate the path.
Mm-hmm.
And that's along with, without a doubt, knowing that you have a God that knows what it's like to suffer, that questioned it all in the garden. For me, that's the most, that will be my, people are always like, what's your life verse? I was like, oh, the garden. Like, I don't want to do this. I will. I don't want to. Like, right. Like, how much of that is our lives? Like,
ultimate humanity right there.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so this piece of like, you have a God that loves you so you are loved. And I want you to live as loved as you are. And to know that when it is really dark, it probably just means he's that close, even if he's really quiet. And that permission. And I even thought about like, I referred to God as a he. I thought about doing the whole day thing because I'm transitioning to that piece, but like the father piece is a big deal. And so like, that's in the book, like, right. You may not have a father that is great. Mm-hmm. Refuse to put those characteristics on your loving almighty father. Because we have a generation of people who have lost that because of those hurts. And so I am anxious. It's interesting. I did a TikTok on it. I've never had this happen to me for a book. I published a lot of books at this point, but like I have had, I think maybe 3 messages from people that I don't know asking if they can see the book before they buy it.
Like a sample or?
Yeah. And there's sometimes samples on Amazon, right? And I don't know. The first like few pages, but half the time, the first few pages are just like all the credits and the reviews. It's not actual content. Right. And as of right now, they're not up there. I'm not in control of that. And so like, I told Chad, I was like, I've never had this happen. And he goes, well, what do you think it is? And it was a perfect example of the work that I teach. Because I said, the story I'm making up is that they want to make sure that I am writing about their version of God, in which case also the story that I'm making up is that they're going to be greatly disappointed. And Chad looks at me and he goes, that is not the story I'm making up. I go, well, what's the story you're making up? And he goes, the story I'm making up is that they think you're dumb enough to send the whole PDF, to which case they're going to share it, steal it, and publish it themselves. I was like, oh my God, that's worse.
And I don't see either one of those.
Right. And I was like, how amazing of an example of this work is it? Like, our stories, one, are hardly ever kind or generous, right? They're usually very dramatic. Worst case, and they're not going to be the same as the person that you even know the best, right? Like, and I was like, it's probably just like they want to make sure that what their kids are reading, things like that. Like, I totally get it. I'm going to be generous, but I just never have been asked that before. And so it's just been such an interesting part of this book does feel very scary to release into the world, because religion has hurt a lot of people. And I do think these last 2 years, unfortunately, have not done Christianity. It's not brought more people to Jesus when I think it really could have.
Yeah.
Because I also don't know how people have gotten through it without him. I don't. And so I always tell people, like, you will hear about Jesus from me. And I also need you to know that my Jesus is the sit beside you and love you well Jesus, not the one that chooses religion from a book that was written 2,000 years ago that's been interpreted through really flawed human beings for a very long time. And I would love to talk with you about that. So it's scary to release, right? Like a Christian book underneath a Christian publisher. It's intimidating, because you have that question of, like, am I Christian enough? Do I care if I'm Christian enough? Maybe it doesn't need to be about that. It just needs to be about love and grace.
Exactly.
And I know I did that. I know I wrote that. So that's what I hope people get from it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm so excited for this book.
Thank you.
I mean, just listening to you, I want to be able to, I mean, what an opportunity to bond with my stepdaughter is over these things. And I can relate to the religious aspect, because my stepdaughter has a mom who does not believe in Christianity or anything. And so it's been a tension,
Right.
in the family. And so it'll be interesting to get this book and be able to have those conversations about anxiety. Because again, I think every child experiences anxiety because they don't have a lot of control over life, and be able to pull in what Christianity. I know a lot of people, like you said, create stories around that word, right?
Totally.
But ultimately what it is exactly what you said, is love. And so that's the message.
Absolutely.
And that is the message that I think kids need to understand. Not I'm going to give you whatever you want love.
Correct.
Ultimate love. Yep.
And to know that they're enough. Like, God created them in his image. I'll be kind of interested to see what some feedback is on that piece. Like, I'm not enough because Jesus saved me. I'm enough because God created me with and in so much love. And that is enough. We are enough. It just comes back to love. Always.